I know our class and sessions and our um, history and politics has been kind of thrown off. I've had some positive developments going on that's thrown off the schedule, but that does not mean that our channel is any less important. So I have decided to stop and to do a kind of history and politics mixed with a class in session. This is not necessarily a current event given political framework, but to an extent in which it will. It is. It's not something that has happened right now, but it's always an underlying factor that I ponder. And what made me kind of reflect on this topic is I was reading the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. And I did a video on how, for many of the same reasons I disagree with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I disagree with Nelson Mandela. Dr. Martin, but still in different ways. Even though it's similar sentiments, they're distinctly different ways that I disagree with them. Uh, the biggest place of disagreement I have with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is that I feel his message offered humanity, the public, a misrepresentation of the dominant culture in America. That there was a loving, altruistic, um, fair side of white America. And the system of white supremacy was only based on a lack of knowledge and a lack of awareness, as opposed to a historic and global disposition of the people of European descent to function in a way of oppressive systems, even within their own group, once they oppressed the indigenous people. And that is generally hidden behind the word democracy, that Europeans are coming to spread democracy, and that's never been the case. Even when they had monarchies, they did the same thing, and that was because this was a better monarchy. Now they're saying this is a better system of government, but that's not what it is. They come for the resources, and they suppress, oppress, and depress the indigenous people and take the resources and control the economy and the government and enrich themselves. And for Dr. Martin Luther King to misrepresent that group of people means that he either had a lack of study or a lack of awareness. My disagreement with Nelson Mandela is something, I guess disagreement may not be the right word. I don't understand. I cannot process. And this kind of overlaps with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as well. How do you not hold, for lack of a better term, aggression toward the oppressive group, given the events and systems that have been in place and are still in place that let you know you can't trust them? Now, again, this is not personal. This does not mean every single white person. It is one thing that the autobiography of Malcolm X points out very specifically. This is not about each and every white person or each and every black person. But to say there's good and bad in each group is not a historical representation, because there is a majorative movement that is in people of European descent that is harmful to other groups. And black people have not, American black people in particular, not necessarily continental Africans, but we'll get into that splitting of hairs when we start talking about atrocities on the African continent done by different groups. I dare someone present to me a mass atrocity on the African continent that is recorded that was not instigated by European powers. So most of our historic atrocities belong to that group of people. And that's just historically speaking. Take your feelings out of it. Yes, Attila the Hun, the Mau Mau, you have to always understand, people have always fought within themselves. That by history is natural. What is atypical is to function like a virus, to come in, attach to a host, kill the host, and run it. Well, run everything, take over, and then kill it. That can be said for North America. One unique thing about North America's colonization or imperialism is that they actually killed the host. White Americans feel like this is their country because this particular form of white supremacy or imperialism erased the indigenous people. That didn't happen in India. That didn't happen in Africa. That didn't happen in Australia. That is very unique. That didn't happen in South America. That didn't happen in the Caribbean. There's a very unique dynamic that occurred, particularly in North America. So there is a sense of ownership and power that functions within the American white mind that is even separate from the European. Now we're really dicing this up, which is why we can't do individuals. We have to, history is broad thought, broad representation. So in that, we had established that the people of European descent on the North American continent have a unique experience in white supremacy for two things: Native American genocide, and then on top of that, chattel slavery, the commodification of a people. That didn't happen anywhere else. The extent to which Protestant, British, American slavery occurred was even distinctive from slavery in the Western Hemisphere. So now we have a new and different dynamic that is particularly here that separates from the world. And again, what I didn't understand before I move on to the United States about Mandela, how did you not hold that aggression against a group of people that are historically untrustworthy, that historically want and will function toward your demise, and want them beside you? It goes back to that integration video I did. Was that really our brightest point, to want to integrate with the murderers, the thieves, the dishonest people, the liars, the child molesters, the misogynists, the enslavers, the greedy. That's who we want to integrate with. And that was at the core of Mandela's call for all South Africans, white, Indian, colored, black. Color and black is not the same thing in South Africa. Why would you think someone who went to the extent to which they did in apartheid, and apartheid is a very specifically hateful system. It is definitely akin in detail to Jim Crow. I mean, to making eye contact and how you answer somebody, and if you can wear short pants or long pants, if any white person walked up to you in the apartheid system and told you to go do something, you had to do it if you knew them or not. That's the person you want to bond with and make part of your, that you're going to trust after they have functioned in and at least with that system. That's who you're going to bring into that system. That just doesn't settle well with me as being prudent. And obviously it didn't work. I have not reached his age of majority. He was not like that when he went into prison. He wasn't like that when he went in prison. He was very militant. He even fought for armed rebellion, and at one time he wanted nothing to do with any white representation. So this was something that he experienced over time, and when he got in his 70s and 80s, this was more of his mindset. But to me, it just doesn't make sense. Because the experiences are so different and the value systems are so different. And even in what we would call good white people that truly don't subscribe to that system or are so oppressed by the economic system that they don't have time to participate because they don't have the power to participate in that system. You still have these major differences as to where I don't see how that is the most logical outcome. And if there is a system of spirituality that tells me that's supposed to be the outcome, I don't trust it. I just don't. I don't trust any system of spirituality that tells me I have to trust someone that has proven to be systematically and majoritively untrustworthy. And how the people who belong to that group don't know why that reaction is logical makes them suspect to me too. Those are the I didn't do it people. Well, if I know everybody with the last name Bolton has broken into your house, I shouldn't be surprised when you lock the gate when you see me coming. That's as odd as for 5 days, somebody different named Bolton has broken into your house. When I come down the street, everybody knows that my name is Bolton, and I am upset that I didn't break in your house. Why would you think I would? No, I understand. My uncle did, my brother did, my cousin did, my sister did, my aunt did. It is logical for you to think that I would. Now, if it's important to me for you to know that I won't do it, I have to, I have to recognize, yes, I know what happened. I then have to understand how you feel about it. And then I have to prove to you that I'm different from them. Because you have every logical reason to expect that from me. Now, if I don't want to do that, fine, but understand that door is going to be locked every time I come down the street. So I find many of the white Americans who take that posture of I didn't do it or I don't understand, that's reverse racism. I take that posture as being willfully ignorant and maintaining a plausible deniability to maintain innocence and advantage. So, in that, we have this unique dynamic of the North American white person, whiteness again, invented in 1681. And if you don't understand that whiteness was invented in 1681, before you comment and say something inconsistent with historical information, look up the anti-miscegenation laws and read them. Or get a history book, a university history book, YAWP, HAWP, get that. It's in there. It's not a big chapter, but it's in there. We see things very differently. And if you do not believe that poverty, if you believe poverty makes us equal or being American makes us equal, let's just take something you can look at right now. White people generally, white Americans, have a much different view of the police. If there is a legal case where police are on trial, they're going to move the case to somewhere where the jury is more than likely going to be white. Now, this is not because white people are more supportive of the law. Okay, if that were so, we wouldn't have had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment ignored for 100 years. Okay, we wouldn't have had protests against Brown versus Board of Education. We wouldn't have protests against, we wouldn't have, Nixon wouldn't have to put forward the Philadelphia Plan. We wouldn't have had the Kerner Report ignored since 1969. Just nobody knows what Kerner Report is. CRT is just something black folks made up. But so Americans, especially white Americans, have ignored law just when they disagreed with it. I mean, all the way to the proclamation line with the colonialists. England said, do not go past this line. We don't want to mess up with Native Americans. They just kept going, kept taking land. But let's look at this issue with police. Black people look at police as an agent of harm, a representative of violence. Not every black person, just think broadly. White people generally think of police as help. Now, why would that be? Historically, the police have been used to enforce the agenda of the state. And that manifests differently in white and black neighborhoods. If I am functioning under the law of convict leasing, Jim Crow, segregation, Plessy versus Ferguson, civil rights resistance, war on drugs with Nixon, war on drugs with militarized war on drugs with Reagan, mass incarceration of second Bush forward, there is a hostility geared toward fear, arrest, and the assumption of guilt and the freedom to enact violence in one community because of the framework of the law. Not just social and cultural, we can put that in there, but we're just talking about the law because we're talking about police. There were no laws to enforce amongst poor whites that said you can't live here. There were no laws that were to be enforced upon poor whites that said you can't vote. There were no laws enforced amongst poor whites that you can't work here, or you can't eat here, or you can't vacation here, or you have no access here. So their relationship was functioning with the law. If something happened outside of what I can do, that's when you came, or to make sure somebody who was doing something they weren't supposed to do. So now they're two different viewpoints of the law. Were there historic situations where the police were used to police poor whites? Yes. When it deals with labor, union strikes, there are many records of police being used or military being used to forcefully compel poor whites to do what rich whites wanted them to do. But we don't teach that. And it's so few in comparison to the many laws that were enforced by Black people that it's not as obvious. But the reason why we don't teach it is because we don't want whites to see that the same system that keeps them poor is the same system that keeps blacks poor. We don't want that in our educational system. You got to remember, one of the biggest people for financing the formation of public education, which was John D. Rockefeller, said we want a nation of workers, not a nation of thinkers. And the reason why this was done was going back to the anti-miscegenation laws. They don't want the poor people to unite. This country, because remember, 1686 is far, 1681 is far before 1776 when the United States began. The United States has always functioned under a narrative of rich white people telling poor white people, women, immigrants, and non-Black people were the reason why they were not part of the rich white people. So the police are used differently, and when they're used the same, that connection is not made there. Our education is made to either make this group that their circumstances don't apply to try to make themselves feel like they're a part of this group's reality, when even the United States Constitution said this group isn't. We had to add in, half the population is actually part of the country. And that's something I don't understand how women let that ride. Because until 1940, women had no participatory place in government. 1940. That's 30 years before I was born. Me. Not in black and white film. Me. But I look at these white female politicians talking about what our country is and what our country isn't, and I'm going, you are truly, especially if you're around 50 years old, you are barely one generation of participation. Other than that, you'd be under coverture. But you're telling these other people that what the country is and what the country isn't. So that's just, everything doesn't have an answer. This is just something for us to ponder. And please, leave comments, but think about it. Don't get in your feelings. And I'm going to ask you, what sources are you citing? Whatever example you give me, I'm asking you, when did that happen? Who was involved? What year was it? And what source did that come from? Now I'm not trying to tie you up. That's the point of this channel. How to do research and how to actually gain a qualified understanding of the system in which you're functioning in.